Frogman Friday.
Yeah, boy. What's up, everyone? It's that time again. Welcome to the Frogman Friday Show. Presented by Transcend, the best peptide and hormone therapy. They put your health first so you can live more and worry less. Go to transcendcompany.com/Birdman to begin your wellness transformation today. Today, our badass guest is Drew Forsberg, aka Furby, aka Sheepdog. Navy SEAL, 22 years of service, Warrant Officer 3. He's the Fractional Chief Operations for Beyond the Brotherhood, which was founded in 2022, and you can catch them on all social media channels. To take a deeper dive, go check out beyondthebrotherhood.org. Brother, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Birdman.
Yeah, man, we got a list. We just talked about Beyond the Brotherhood, but we got a list of things that I want to go through with you. So I want to get into your background. I want to get into your life, your belief systems. And I want to talk about things that you're interested in. But first and foremost, as I always jump into with guys, is, transitioning from career. I did 8 years in the service. It was still difficult for me to transition out. But for somebody who actually goes the distance, it can be very cumbersome. And a lot of guys have trouble with it. Talk to us about your transition. What was that like for you getting out?
Well, I'm not sure. You hear the roosters in the background?
For sure.
We got feral chickens all over the place. And usually we'll kill them. Like my son will trap them and we'll eat them later. But in the meantime, we have to deal with them.
Cool.
So yeah, for my transition, I thought I was going to do 30 years in the teams. I just loved it. And I liked being a warrant officer because I felt like I was no longer underneath the thumb of officers. In fact, they couldn't touch me and I was going to get promoted anyway. And so I could finally tell them to buzz off when they were talking about doing something stupid. So it was very liberating. But nevertheless, at the 19 and a half year mark, the vaccine mandate came out. And so I had to be prepared to lose it all. And the upper echelons, they were very clear about their intent of getting rid of me as soon as possible.
Wow.
I played my cards pretty well and pretty hard. Right away, I was like, all right, fine. I'll drop 30 days vacation, 30 days leave. And immediately my OIC, because I was down at the training detachment here in Hawaii, my OIC called me and said, hey, what do you need 30 days leave for? I'm like, well, you guys apparently said that I'm more of a liability than I am an asset to you. I'm not getting this vaccine. So I'm just going to take my 30 days leave now, and in case the Navy kicks me out. So I might as well get it while I can. And he was like, well, I kind of need you around. Oh, you need me around because I'm your operations officer and you don't have anybody else. So you need me? Is that what I just heard? And he was like, yeah, you're right. I'll give you as much time as you need to plan everything out. I'm sure you're going to be getting out now, but please don't drop 30 days leave. Okay. So I walked around pretty smug and I knew that I owned all the cards. They needed me more than I needed them. And I was able to join the vaccine lawsuit. So we got this preliminary injunction, which basically kept us able to serve. The Navy couldn't kick us out. It was decided that what they were doing was completely illegal. And at the same time that the preliminary injunction dropped, meaning everybody in the Navy who submitted for a religious accommodation was now untouchable. That was also the same month that I was due for my command service reenlistment bonus. So I got another 2 years of a bonus, and everybody says you need 2 years to plan your transition. So I was able to take those next 2 years and plan all of that out. Like I knew without the shadow of a doubt that I was no longer going to stay in the Navy. So I went to those clinics for, TBI, took as many schools as I possibly could. Went and took as many like NKO classes that I possibly could to kind of like try to polish up that resume. I did the Honor Foundation. So that introduces guys like, okay, what is LinkedIn? You feel gross getting a LinkedIn account and saying, Navy SEAL, like I'm not even putting that on there. So I changed my LinkedIn profile until after I got out, but at least I knew what LinkedIn was and how to write a resume and how to translate. Okay, you were an urban warfare instructor for 3 years. Well, that doesn't translate in a resume. So how do you translate it? You were a strategic consultant for a cross-functional team, right? And you're putting on scenarios and you're giving them feedback. And so how to spell that out in corporate speak, that was a huge help. So I got my mind kind of wrapped around this for a good 2 years before I finally punched out. And one of the other programs I took advantage of was the Navy has something called Skill Bridge, and Special Operations Command, they have something very similar called a fellowship program, in which while you're still getting paid as active duty, you can do up to 6 months working for a civilian company, learning the ropes, learning what it's like for them. And you're kind of like an intern, but you're still getting your Navy paycheck. And then at the end of that internship, maybe you get a job offer, maybe not, but at least you got some experience and some awareness underneath your belt. So I did mine with Beyond the Brotherhood. Beyond the Brotherhood was a nonprofit started by a good friend named Jimmy May, one of the commanders who didn't make commanding officer. And he was like, you can just do the fellowship under our umbrella. You'll work for us. You'll understand what a nonprofit works like. You'll come out to some of the events. You'll get to know a lot of successful business people that have, cracked the code of the matrix of American capitalism. That'll increase your network. And at the end of that 4 months that I did with Beyond the Brotherhood, he was like, I think you should really look at doing a quasi internship underneath our umbrella with Pray.com. Pray.com is an app on your phone. It's a digital tech company, and they're running about 55 employees. I was the operations officer for 55-person command over at Training Detachment in Hawaii. And so Pray.com linked me up with their ops guy, and I could see ops to ops. What does that look like? What are the similarities? What are the differences? And there's a whole lot of similarities. And it gave me that confidence. Like, if I wanted to go out and go into corporate life and I get myself an ops job, that I would excel. Like, the team guys would just kind of like fit in, give me a couple of weeks to get caught up to speed on what the business model looks like. And ops to ops, it's usually like people problems and communication issues. So that's kind of how I finished my transition.
Wow. That's a crazy transition. Most guys are like, yeah, it was time for me and I got out and I struggled, or, yep, had a plan, got out right away, started working, all is well. But that vaccine mandate was just, it was a shit show to say the least. No question about it.
Yeah, I had another interesting development because of all of this. I mean, it really got my headspace in, holy crap, I need to get out. And I need to think of something fast because the Navy was willing to kick me out really quick. So I wasn't sure which way this was going to pan out. And one of the things that I started as a hobby was doing regenerative agriculture inside my little tiny yard here. My wife was like, please do not farm the entire yard. And I'm like, okay, we'll bite off the perimeter, about 3 feet of the perimeter of the property, and start growing some things and having the backyard chickens and exploring all this regenerative agriculture. And I was like, maybe I could launch an edible landscaping business. It'd be cash based, and we could at least afford to maybe pay the mortgage if we get kicked out tomorrow. And God being who he is, he linked me up. I'm a big time surfer, and linked me up with a crew who are guys by my age. We like to wake up super early. We like to paddle out while it's still dark, and they know all the secret spots, and we're big wave surfers. And one of those guys already does regenerative agriculture as a business. Like, he works on these 5-acre small parcel farms out here that people buy, and he helps them implement basically edible landscaping, but more on a bigger scale. And what I learned is, okay, while I'm a hobbyist at actually growing things, he's a master. But what he's a little bit short on is the business sense. So I'm helping him like create the spreadsheets and the estimates and contracts and all of that like back end ops stuff for him. So that's another thing that it's kind of like developed. But again, I had to come up with a business model and all these other things before I got out. So that kind of also introduced me like, all right, what is a business model? What is a business plan? How do you write one? And so these are all the kind of little things that God just kept putting together before I got out.
Did you always know that you had the entrepreneurial/business mindset?
No, not really. I grew up in a small town out on the east end of Long Island, and my great-grandfather started a fishing business out there. He started it because he lost a couple fingers digging the Holland Tunnel, and they gave him like some severance money. And so he went and bought a fishing boat. And so he was out catching fish, selling fish, and feeding his family. And then a guy came by and said, hey, you seem to be kind of good at this. Can you take me fishing out tomorrow? And he was like, well, I don't have any rods. I'm all hand lines. And he's like, that's okay. I got the rods. So next day, the dude shows up. They go out fishing. They catch a bunch of fish. And the guy leaves after paying him, and he's like, "Hey, you forgot your rods." And he's like, "No, you keep them." And that guy was Penn from Penn Reels and Penn Rods. And so he went home and told his wife, like, "Hey, babe, I think I can make money doing this." And so then he pivoted to doing what's called party boat fishing, taking people out per head to go out fishing. And he developed a business, brought it out to Montauk Point, Long Island. My grandfather built that business even more. And I got to grow up, like as a mate on the fishing boats, and understood like, all right, we're not here to catch fish. We're here to sell smiles. People are here to have a good time. And so I got to understand that's how the service industry works, even in a fishing business. But I walked into a lot of other careers or jobs like driving taxi cabs and being a waiter and busboy and all kinds of different things. So I was always working before I joined the Navy, but I never really thought much about being an entrepreneur.
Same. It's interesting. I would much rather go through Hell Week again than be a busboy, as I worked for I think they were like the mafia family in Michigan, and they just demanded, and of course everybody would call off on Sundays. So I'm there right after church in the rush of church, and I'm doing the busing and the cleaning. And this podcast is not about me, but anyway, it was not fun. So I'd much rather go through Hell Week again. Let's dig in. You talk about God's leading you down this direction, and I am a Christian myself. Let's talk about your faith. When did you come to Christ? And let's get on a deeper subject on that.
Sure. Yeah. My little town out in Montauk, there was two churches. There was a Catholic church and a Protestant church, and that was it. You were either one or the other. And I grew up quasi-Catholic, meaning like every once in a while we'd go to church, and after school sometimes there would be, religion class. And for me at 9, you had to learn your some prayers before you went and did your first Holy Confession, and you had to do that before you got your first Holy Communion. And so I remember at 9 going into that box and telling the priest, like, being completely convicted. I tell lies. I beat up my brother. I say cuss words when no one's around. And the priest was like, it's not that big a deal. He goes, go up to the pew and say 6 Hail Marys and 10 Our Fathers, and everything's forgiven. So at 9, I was like, I don't think so. This doesn't work. This doesn't compute. And, I grew up going to public school and the full indoctrination with dinosaurs and millions of years and all of that other stuff. And I would ask questions, like, hey, teacher, how do they know that? Well, Drew, because they're scientists. Yeah, but how do the scientists know that? Well, if you want to know, you have to go be a scientist. So just shut up and answer the right question for the test. Okay. And so that kind of like stuck with me all the way through high school and then college. And then, when I joined the SEAL teams, 9/11 happened. So that was the reason I quit college and decided to sign up. But after my first deployment, I kind of recognized that Islam was not like any other religion, and not all the religions are the same like I was taught. So maybe there's some differences. And a friend of mine started telling me about creation science. And I was like, bro, evolution is a fact. I aced college anthropology. And he was like, hey man, those people that say they're open-minded but never hear your side of the story? I'm like, yeah, I can't stand those people. And he's like, well, you're kind of being one right now. And I was like, that's fair point. So he started bringing over these DVDs that discussed creation science. And by the end of it, I was like, oh my goodness, I've been lied to. I've been brainwashed. And I was onto something as a kid asking these questions. And it seems now that I know what is the definition of science, I do remember that. That's something that you can observe, test, and repeat. And you can't observe, test, and repeat billions of years. You can't observe, test, and repeat a lizard giving birth to a chicken. Not going to happen. So what does the Bible say? And does that add up with observational science? Things will bring forth after their own kind. Lizards are going to bring forth lizards and chickens bring forth chickens. Yeah, we observe, test, and repeat that every single time. So I was now on board with Genesis 1 through 11. Those chapters, if that could be true, then I guess the rest of the Bible might be true. This was in 2006. So I was also I already read the Da Vinci Code, right? So I was like, well, maybe the Old Testament's true, buddy, but I don't know about creation, about Jesus, basically because of the Da Vinci Code. And he was like, well, again, why don't you pick up a rebuttal? It's caused a lot of controversy. See what the Christians say about it. And I was like, okay, fair enough. And by the end of it, I was like, facepalm. I can't believe I believed a fiction novel. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm a Christian now, go Christians. And same friend was like, hey man, we got this, there's this Christmas play, you want to go with me? And I was like, not really. I'm not really into church. And he was like, well, it's a play. My girlfriend can't go and I have this extra ticket. And I was like, okay, I'll go. And I'm imagining a play about Jesus and Mary and Joseph in the manger and that kind of thing. And it was about a woman who grew up in church and she was super stressed out about Christmas. And a friend of hers kind of was like, hey, you know what? When you're super stressed out, one of the best things to do is just reflect on what Jesus did for you on the cross. And think about that day when you were born again and when you had your first day of salvation, and just reflect on that moment. And by the end of the play, I realized like, oh, born again. Born again is not some new age term that's, you grew up in church and went and hoarded around for a while, and then you come back to church and you're born again. No, this is a term that Jesus said, you must be born again. He said that to a religious scholar. Ye, as in all y'all, need to be born again. Oh, I'm not born again. And so on December 18th, 2005, I decided at the end of that church service, raise my hand. All right, how do I get saved? And somebody walked me down the Romans road, so to speak. I knew I was a sinner. I knew that there was a price for that sin. I knew that Jesus paid the price for that sin on the cross. And whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Got it. So December 18th, 2005 was the day. Got baptized about a month later and slowly started growing in my faith. A lot of times for Christians, it's like, I'm so used to all of these things. So I kept going out and like doing all the party and all the other stupid stuff that I did before December 18th, 2005. But now it felt icky. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I was kind of at a crossroads, and God being who he is, he sent a guy into my platoon, a guy named Keith Darris, great guy. And he had a family. He was a surfer. He was a Christian. He had already done 2 deployments, and he lived right up the street from me. So we became bros, and he totally mentored me on a lot of things about the Bible, Christian living. And he was like, hey man, you don't need to go out partying with, Dirty and Brad and the other guys. You don't have to do that anymore. And kind of even convicted me on my cussing and foul language and all these other things. And so it just kind of kept growing. And so 2.5 years later, I was finally able to put both feet in, so to speak, into the church and quit drinking. Met my wife a few weeks later. She's a pastor's daughter. She would not even consider dating a guy who even socially drank. And my father-in-law was like, well, okay, let's see. You've only been a Christian for a couple of years. I'm gonna have to pray about this one. But he at the end of it was like, all right, you can talk to her. And then, gave me permission to finally marry her after a couple of years. So that's kind of like how I came to faith, and slowly inched over from 1 foot in and 1 foot out to both feet being put in.
So it's great, man, because it's just like there's probably a plethora of different ways to actually come to Christ, but 2 common ones I see are when you just start asking questions and he starts drawing you in closer when you ask to receive him. And then the other side is when you hit real rock bottom, when you're dark, and it's a lot easier to start asking questions than go dark. So
yeah,
nice
I'm
work.
I'm glad I didn't go there.
Yeah. So that's amazing, man. We'll keep mentoring people in that too, because there's a lot of guys who, I was the same thing. I was raised Catholic, and I did all the things up to confirmation, and you kind of do catechism and all that stuff, and then you're like, what does this all actually mean? I never even posed the question. I just did it because it was the routine. Till years later when I would actually receive Jesus. But in that doing so, there's a lot of guys who've never been walked down that path. There was no religion in the household whatsoever, and so they don't even know how to ask the questions. So you just keep talking about it. It's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's been cool too, even working with Beyond the Brotherhood, how many guys have come to Christ through the years. Guys that used to tease me, because me and my wife, for instance, I was 29 years old and we were chaperoned 100% of the time. So they're like, what in the world? And so they're all happy for me when I finally got married and came back from my honeymoon. But they razzed me quite a lot. And some of those guys have now also are walking in Christ. And I'm like, well, good. Amen. No grudges here for all those hard times that you gave me.
Absolutely, man. It's like Matt Lenig. Lenig?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I did my first platoon with him, and then I got to work with him in Hawaii after, that's part of the reason I came down to Hawaii, 19 years in San Diego, I was on a trip down here, and it felt like God was telling me and my wife that we were not going to stay in San Diego. And we didn't know why. We had a great church, great house, great neighborhood, great surf spots. Like everything was cooking. There's no way I wanted to leave San Diego, but I felt like he was telling us to. And on a trip down to Hawaii, I was like, all right, Lord, I'm going to make one phone call. And so I called Matt Lenig and was like, hey, Matt, what are the chances that you need a Warrant Officer 3 in April of 2021? Because that's when my orders are up. And he's like, oh my goodness, that's exactly when we need somebody. This is when this guy's retiring and this guy's getting out and this guy's moving on. And I was like, all right. So I came home that week and was like, well, sweetie, I guess we are leaving. We're going to Hawaii.
That's crazy. And now he's out here. He was just at one of our events, and to see the dynamic shift in him for accepting Christ it's mind blowing. It is super cool.
It is. And he's, raising his kids to solidly follow the Lord and everything. It's been really rad. Cause I remember Matt in his old days, and I remember his wife in their old days when they first linked up, and to see such a change in both of them, as well as how they're raising the family. It's just a testimony of what God's power can do.
Amen, brother. Let's dig into Beyond the Brotherhood. So obviously you're over there. Let's talk about what Jimmy May created here. What exactly is Beyond the Brotherhood? What do they do?
They exist to connect Navy SEALs with their next purpose in life. When we say community, purpose, and goals, one of the things that Jimmy pointed out was when he retired, he knew 4 guys personally who died by their own hand within 4 months of his retirement. It's kind of a big deal. And he wanted to make sure that we do something to get after this problem. So one of the ways is making sure that guys are connected with their next purpose. He has some connections through his Harvard Business Network where there are some executives that understand Navy SEALs do a whole lot more than just shoot guns, jump out of airplanes, and blow things up, right? We run the entire enterprise. We run one of the most successful and renowned enterprises there are in the entire world. So if we also do our own hiring and firing of civilians, we run our own budgets, we run our own logistics, we run our own training, we run our own culture. If we're running all of these other things, we can be value added to any organization day one upon stepping in. Give us a couple of weeks to get spun up on the details of the industry, and we're running and being a major asset to the team. So he wanted to make sure that more companies know that, more executives know that, and to vet our guys, meaning like SEAL Future Foundation is all things to all team guys, and it's a great organization. For Beyond the Brotherhood, we want guys to put in a package and with reference checks and tell us like why they want to be part of this organization, so that when we put our stamp behind them, we know that this company is going to get a good, solid dude. So that's what we're kind of doing as far as getting guys connected to their next purpose. And then we're also make sure that we have a good sense of community, because a lot of guys, when they get out, they're location driven. They want to go to Arkansas because that's where their wife is from, or they found some great land in Tennessee, or their hometown was in South Carolina. Unless you're in a SEAL hub, it's kind of hard to maintain that brotherhood.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll have some fundraisers, like an event we have called Triple S, Shoot, Shift, and Save or Survive, out in Central California. We have, civilian American donors that come out for the event, and you've got a bunch of team guys that are coming together for the event, and we're running them in teams. We're teaching them how to do fun things. We've got nods and lasers and driving Humvees and all of this other kind of great stuff. And then at the end of the day, you got some time around the fire pit telling stories, telling Bud stories, and learning from these guys who have cracked the code on American capitalism. What does it take for them? And so now it helps build out a guy's network, building their community outside the SEAL teams, but also just getting to work with team guys. Even though I've never met these guys before, it's like immediately everybody falls in line. Everybody's looking for work. Everyone's trying to figure out what else needs to get done. Everyone's picking up brass. Everyone's cleaning. And so it's like, oh, this was awesome. It just like, it scratches that itch just enough to keep guys feeling like they're still connected and they're still a good team guy.
Yeah, man. It's like that Monday morning muster. I think that was the biggest thing that I missed when I got out, was just, you're not showing up with the brotherhood, razz each other about the weekend and then get word of the week and all that good stuff. Although I don't shave anymore, so that's a beautiful thing.
I was able to have a beard for my first year, and my wife was like, please, 1 year, no more. And so on March 1st, that was my year-long anniversary, and March 3rd was our 15th year wedding anniversary. So I was like, okay, sweetie, I'll shave. And so now I'm back to looking
12.
like I'm still in the military.
Yeah, definitely. You got a pretty face. So I'm the opposite. My wife's like, when I shave, she's like, what are you doing? Grow that back. I'm like, okay. So that's awesome that Beyond the Brotherhood does this, because it is. I mean, the meaning and purpose thing is built from a plethora of things that the SEAL teams offer. It's not just one variable. There's so many ingredients that go into why it makes it so special. And then when you get out, you just like, oh my gosh, you didn't lose one thing. You don't have all of that. And so what you come to realize over time, though, is just because you're not a SEAL, you don't lose the brotherhood. They're still your brothers, but you're just not actively doing it day in day. So helping people find that meaning and purpose outside of the service is so powerful for the mental and emotional side of the house for the brothers. And also to help fast track them, because, you put a team guy in any scenario in business or anything outside of the military and enable them, they will absolutely destroy it. They will crush it. They will become exceptional at what they do, but you just need that little extra oomph, that push, that guidance. And like you said, well-rounding that professionalism to talk about, I'm not just an ops boss here in the military. This is what it actually means as a civilian. This is awesome. People listening right now, what can they do to get behind Beyond the Brotherhood? Where do you guys need help, support? Kind of walk us through that path.
Well, when we bring a guy in, one of the things that we do is we give them full-blown another personality assessment. And it's like, oh, another personality assessment. Yeah, well, this one's a little bit different in that the guy who puts it on was a professional hockey player for 12 years and then got his psychologist degree, and he's come up with this whole assessment. And what that helps guys do is when he paints a picture of what you'd be good at and what you will be feeling fulfilled at, those might be two totally different things. And to get guys understanding, like, all right, maybe like for me, instance, I would not be good picking up a sales job. I might figure it out. I might do okay at it, but I'm not going to feel fulfilled. I'm not going to feel happy. It's just not in line with my personality. And so you kind of get a good one-to-one discussion with him and understand what that looks like. And it's important because, like he says, when he deals with other professional athletes, when they get out of becoming a professional athlete, what are they going to do next? They're like, I guess I'll go be a coach. I guess I'll go coach hockey. And like, no, man, you can do a whole lot more than that. You were able to bring your mind and body to places that most people can't go. So you can do anything. So now it's all about figuring out what's going to be best for you. And so a lot of team guys fall in that same kind of trap. What am I going to do now? And I guess I'll go pick up a gun and do personal security. Like, no, man, you're better than that. You can do something. You can do whatever you want. So that's the kind of feedback that he'll be able to give those guys. And that costs, Beyond the Brotherhood some money, just getting those guys the assessment. And then some of them are they're hooked on a lot of these prescriptions that the Navy has been giving them for pain and for all the other symptoms that they're going for. And so we've got some other like holistic health benefits that have been able to wean guys off a lot of these NSAIDs and these other medications that they're on. So those are kind of the major expenses that we have when we bring guys on. So donations help quite a lot. And then, like I said, if we're going to do these community events, well, we're flying those guys out at no cost to them. We're paying for all their expenses. So that also costs money. So, of course, donating helps out a ton. Attending some of the events that we have listed on the beyondthebrotherhood.org webpage also helps because, they're getting to know some major players in American, industries, and they're able to expand that network. And by coming to our events, you're getting to know the guys personally and getting to see what their passions are. And you're able to maybe help plug them into their next purpose in life. So those are some of the biggest ways to help support Beyond the Brotherhood is coming to our events or just a straight donation.
Check. You guys looking for volunteerism as well during your events?
We are. Yeah. I mean, for team guys, it's like we're vetting everybody who comes to the events, and we've got a queue of guys that we still can't even process because of those initial costs to bring them on. So we're kind of like, hey guys, hold the brakes. We'll get to your package. We'll bring you on when we can. In the meantime, if you need anything, there's some things that we can give to you, like connections for jobs and that kind of stuff, but we're kind of limited there. But for volunteers, it's mostly like we've got people who volunteer to be mentors to our guys, and that's also a huge asset.
That's
Like, for
amazing.
instance, I was able to come up with a business plan for edible landscaping Hawaii because somebody volunteered as a mentor, like, hey, I can help guys with business plans. Fantastic. So I sent him mine. He polished it, and then I've polished it some more, and we're going back and forth. And I was able to win a business competition and win some money to set off edible landscaping, which is now more of a consulting company.
Amazing. So you guys are you looking for business mentors as well that you can
Yes.
qualify?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's funny that you say that about winning that competition. So I created a product years ago, and I knew some guys going to SMU over here in Dallas, and they're like, we're getting ready to finish our MBA, Executive Business School. And they're like, we need to put a business together. And I remember you talking about your product. I was like, yeah. And they're like, can we do that just to get our deal? I was like, you guys want to build me an entire business plan for my company, and you're doing it for free to get your grade? Have at it. And so they did the plan. I stand in college and I'm laughing because I'm a high school graduate who barely made it through high school because I just did not care. And now I'm standing before all these academics and we're actually pitching this. And I'm literally the idiot in the room, though. I'm just the one talking about the device. Well, anyway, they win. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Congrats, guys. And they're like, so can we have a meeting to discuss actually running this now? And I'm like, no, I'm good. I wasn't ready at the time. I didn't want to take it out. I was still working on it, and I wasn't as knowledgeable because I didn't trust in my skill sets just yet. So that was a big thing, but pretty cool. I wanted to say one more thing because people don't know this, but so Drew will always have a special place in my heart. We talked about this offline. So when you go to SEAL training, as most people wouldn't understand this, but when you show up and you see classmates that are in different classes, the classes that are before you, they look like gods to you. They look like war dogs. And what separates the Bloods classes is the color of the helmets. So, you have that green helmets for starters, and then you go to blue and red. And then what's really cool is when you graduate Howie, you get the brown shirt, which is like, oh my gosh, he's a brown shirt, which means he's a Howie survivor. This is the coolest thing in the world. So you see these guys running with their brown shirts and you're just brand new and you're like, wow, what have they seen? Well, I remember I saw Drew running, and he was in class 243, and I was in 245, and see him running with his red helmet. I'm like, that dude is about to graduate. And you're the first red helmet I saw, so I'm like, oh, and I was so smitten. I was like, dude, that dude's cool. Like, wow. So that was you. And then, sure enough, getting to follow in your footsteps and make it to that particular area was really cool. But still. And then I see you over at Team 5 when I was checking into 7, and I'm like, there he is again. Oh, what's it like being at a SEAL team? Kind of at a SEAL team myself, but it's so cool. So no matter where we go in life, there are those like you who I always look up to because you did it before me. You've been there, done that. And that was a huge thing. And, you always carried yourself really well. There was, how it goes in buds, just, 100 to 200 guys to start in a class or whatever. And, you get some arrogance, you get some athletes, you get a little bit of everything in between. And you always carried yourself very professionally. And that just made it even more. You're very quiet, or at least you were very quiet to me. And so there was this mysterious aura about you where I'm like, man, I don't know if I got what it takes to make it to that level. All right. Enough of promoting you and just building you up.
Because I'm just like, I was just the gray man. I was just middle of the pack at best, and just kind of needed to keep my head down. And that's probably also why I was so quiet. I know I'm not funny. I know I don't have any physical attributes that make me stand out. So I'll just stay in the gray. And it's kind of funny that you recognize me. Probably more because my helmet said Forsberg on it. I know you're a hockey player, so that's probably the fan that came out. Oh, Peter Forsberg. He must be related.
Yeah. No. So I thought about that initially because I'm a Red Wings guy and I hated that name. So, but no, it was truly because it doesn't matter where you're at in the pack. It's the fact that you were already there. You had already made it through all the trials. And so you were the dude who was going to graduate. And that was like so cool to me because then it gives you a taste of like, you're starting out, nothing. And you're like, do I got what it takes? I'm going to give it everything I got, but I don't know it. Well, there's a guy right there who is making it. I'm going to size up next to him. I don't know if I can do that. So anyway. All right. Well, everybody, you've listened to this show. I want you to go check out beyondthebrotherhood.org. And if you can, make a donation to them as they help Navy SEALs exit service, retire out of service, and find their new path in life. Donations are hard to come by these days because there are a plethora of charities out there and everybody's asking. So If you could find it in your hearts to make a donation of any level, we would greatly appreciate it. In closing, I want to ask you a story that I ask every single guy. It seems to trip them up, but tell us either a hero story or tell us a story about somebody who has changed the trajectory of your life that no other person, or at least the group in the world, doesn't know this story, because we're trying to tell untold stories and show the human side of you, not just this awesome, hardcore Navy SEAL, 6'2", 250-pound muscular dude. By the way, he is exactly all of that. Tell us the hero story or somebody who changed your life.
Oh, you're right. This did trip me up. I didn't expect to hear this one. Because there's so many great mentors, so it's like, how am I going to pick just one? I would say a guy named, well, his name is, I'm not sure if he's still in. He was a senior chief. I think he might have been over at Team 7 with you. Made it a senior chief and then went ensign and became an officer. And we didn't like get along. We weren't like good buddies by any means. I was an E6 and he was an E8. And one of the things that would happen when we were both working at the training detachment in urban warfare was I was still getting razzed, for my Christian faith. And what I would consistently fall for is I would fall for the trap. I'd take the bait every time. So answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou be like unto him. Meaning, like, if you'll end up looking like a clown if you end up fighting with them. And I would take the bait and I would look up like a clown, and all the other guys in the office were like, okay, here we go. Here comes the popcorn, just watching Drew and one of the guys, battle over like, oh, the Bible's real. And he pulled me aside one day and he was like, hey man, I want you to read this article. And it was about leadership and just kind of being comfortable in your own skin. I was also new as far as being the LPO over the assault cell. And I was also kind of being told like, hey, you need to be a pit bull. And I was like, it just doesn't really feel right. So between these two aspects and reading this article, what he was teaching me was I just needed to really be myself and not get razzed by these other guys and to let it kind of roll off of me and just be me. And I was then leaving that job and going to SEAL Team 3 very shortly to be a platoon LPO, where I could really settle in as being myself. So that's where I got the name Sheepdog. Was I had this silly patch on my green notebook here, Sheepdog. And my platoon chief was like, oh, Sheepdog, huh? And I'm like, we're protecting the sheep out there, right? He's like, yeah, but sheepdogs aren't really a tough animal. And I'm like, well, okay, not going to bother me, right? And then he found out I was a Christian, and he was like, oh, I don't know, and we were talking about like crushing the enemy or something. He's like, well, it doesn't sound very Christian. And this is where I kind of learned that other side of the verse, answer a fool according to his folly, lest thou be likened to him. And I was like, oh, really? That sounds like you've done a lot of study about this. So tell me, why don't you tell me about Deuteronomy chapter 20 or Matthew chapter 5 and the rest of the context of that Sermon on the Mount? And he's like, well, I don't really know about that. And I'm like, oh, so you haven't done any study. Do you want to talk about this more, or were you just repeating something? He was like, wow, kind of like let it go. And then embracing this whole sheepdog thing, because I was like, I'm just going to over communicate as the LPO. I'm going to be myself. I've got whiteboards, obviously, even running my homeschool with my kids and everything. I'm a big whiteboard fan. So I put things out on whiteboards, text message, fire team meetings, all of those kinds of things, and make sure that there was no excuse for anybody to not know what place, what time, and what uniform and what gear to bring. So I had to kind of over communicate all of these things. I was just kind of like myself, kind of quiet, like you said. But then if somebody started giving one of our guys a hard time about something, like, the gunner's mate, first class, giving my E5 a hard time for asking for extra EOTechs, I was going to be down there and barking down his neck. And then we're like, yeah, get him, sheepdog, get him. So every once in a while, I'd have to bark at my guys or at other guys. And so that's where I kind of got the name Sheepdog. And I was glad to embrace that. And, at first it's like kind of a dig, and then later on it became kind of like an exaltation. So those are kind of the major moments that helped my whole SEAL career. And I would say that all came down to that one instance in the trade ed office with who just happened to pull me aside, saw where I was going through, and said, "Hey, why don't you read this article about leadership and just being comfortable in your own skin?" And it kind of changed how I led, and as I became a servant leader and everything else for the teams. I know we don't always see eye to eye on a whole lot of things, but that moment changed my entire leadership style and how I behaved in the SEAL teams.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, we were in sister platoons on my last deployment. They deployed to Afghanistan though, but we did work up together. But I had known him because I was at 7 my whole time. So yeah, good dude, and has had a hell of a career himself. So that's awesome that he did that for you. And that's the unique thing about the teams, is that you will find mentors who will speak to you. And while you feel that they're giving you all kinds of gems on the job, it's really life gems. It goes so much further.
Yeah.
And a lot of the principles I use today are because of those guys and what they've taught me. So thanks for sharing, my man. And thank you for, being willing to jump on here. I know, like you had mentioned earlier, putting your name and tying Navy SEAL to it publicly it's an interesting thing for guys when they're getting out. And what you'll come to realize more you go down this path is that we used to find that our M4 was our most powerful weapon that we use to actually do our job, but our voice is our most powerful weapon. And if we use it correctly, we can actually change the trajectory and take things to where we want them to go. So I appreciate you doing that. And I'm always going to look up to you, and just grateful to have you as a brother. And that's my closing statement. Everybody go check out beyondthebrotherhood.org. Go make a donation, because every bit helps our community and the brotherhood who have sacrificed so much for this country. Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, Birdman.
Frogman